Hello students, this audio is being made for MA third semester students for the paper Public Administration. This audio is in continuation of the last audio where I have spoken about the evolution of administrative theory, and in this audio I will be speaking on the new developments that have taken place in the evolution of the administrative theory. So, one of the new developments that took place in the evolution of administrative theory was the emergence of the concept of new public administration. The concept of new public administration was developed in the 1960s in the United States of America, and this concept of new public administration is considered as the new paradigm in the evolution of the administrative theory. There are a couple of factors that led to the rise and emergence of new public administration. Among them, some of the factors are as follows. Honey Committee Report on Higher Education for Public Service in 1967 in the United States of America. The Honey Committee report was submitted in 1967 in the United States of America. And the second factor was the Philadelphia Conference on the Theory and Practice of the Public Administration. This is again in 1967. And the third factor is the Minnowbrook Conference 1968. And the fourth and fifth factors are the publication of Toward a New Public Administration, the Minnowbrook Perspective. This is the book edited by Frank Marini in 1971. And the last factor is publication of Public Administration in a Time of Turbulence, edited by Dwight Waldo in 1971. These are the factors that led to the rise and emergence of the concept of new public administration. The John C. Honey, who chaired this committee that was formed in 1966 and popularly called as Honey Report on Higher Education, undertook an evaluative study of the public administration in the universities across the United States of America. The Honey Report in 1967 identified 4 problems confronting the discipline of public administration. The first problem was the inadequate funds at the disposal of the discipline. According to committee, there were no adequate funds to pursue research studies in the field of public administration. So, due to inadequacy of funds, students were not attracted to study public administration. Researchers were not doing enough research in the field of public administration. And the second problem identified by the committee was uncertainty and confusion over the status of the discipline. People were thinking that whether it is a discipline or whether is it a discipline, a science or an art or a profession. So there was huge confusion and uncertainty over the status of public administration as an academic discipline. So another problem found out by Honey Committee report was institutional shortcoming. Very less number of universities had the Department of public administration. So this institutional shortcoming was also identified by the Honey Committee. And the last problem, that is the fourth problem identified by Honey Committee report, was communication gap between public administration scholars and the practicing administrators. So these were the four problems identified by Honey Committee report. So in the backdrop of these developments, Minno Brook Conference was happened in 1968, where young scholars from the discipline of political science and public administration participated under the leadership of Dwight Waldo to discuss the status and the problems confronted by the public administration as an academic discipline. The another big contest for the Minno Brook Conference was the disturbed phase of 1960s in the United States of America. The decade of 1960s was the most turbulent periods in the history of United States of America. In that decade, two big political assassinations took place. In the beginning of the decade, the then President John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and in the later part of the decade, civil rights movement leader Martin Luther King was also assassinated. So these two political assassinations took place in the United States of America in the decade of 1960s. Apart from these two political assassinations, there were many other disturbing events that took place in the society of the United States of America. Americans were protesting against their own government. They were demanding their government to withdraw from the Vietnam War, because in the Vietnam War, thousands of American soldiers were being killed. The families of the deceased soldiers were protesting, and other sections of the American society were also protesting against their own government to withdraw from the Vietnam War. And at the same time, riots were taking place, blacks were being attacked, complete unrest was prevailing in the universities. So that was completely a turbulent phase in the history of the United States of America. So in such a situation, the students of political science and public administration were thinking that what is public administration doing when American society is undergoing such a serious, turbulent and disturbed phase. They saw public administration doing nothing. They found public administration as helpless. So that provoked them to gather and deliberate and discuss on the various methods and measures to make public administration relevant and significant. As a result, This Minnow Conference took place in 1968 in the Minnow Conference Center of the Syracuse University under the leadership of Dwight Waldo. And the major themes that were discussed in this conference were relevance, values, equity, and change. These were the four themes that were discussed in the conference. To begin with, the theme of relevance. What is the theme of relevance? All the young scholars who participated in the Minnow Conference thought of making public administration as relevant. So, in order to make public administration as relevant, what should be done? What measures to be taken? So, they have discussed on the various questions which were to be taken by public administration, how to take up those questions, how to take up those issues, what would be the social and moral implications of the actions of public administration, what are the uses of public administration and political science, what should be the syllabus of public administration, what should be taught to the students of public administration so that it becomes relevant, so that it is taken seriously, so that it gets respect. So these were the issues that were discussed to make public administration as relevant. So another theme that was discussed in this conference was values. Participants discussed on the theme of values. They were of the opinion that public administration cannot be separated from values. It cannot be value neutral. In order to function, public administration should be value loaded. Without being value loaded, it cannot function properly. So it can't be value neutral. So once it loses its value quotient, it will become irrelevant. That's what they thought, and they rejected the dichotomy between politics and administration as suggested by Woodrow Wilson. So this is the theme they discussed, and another theme that was discussed in the Minnow Conference was social equity. Participants were of the opinion that public administration should be the agent of social change. They should be the public administration, and the practitioners of public administration should be the champions of social equity. They should take up the cause of downtrodden, those who are marginalized, and bring them on par with the developed sections of the society. So in order to do this, they have emphasized on the distributive functions of the governmental institutions. Then the another theme that was discussed in Minnow conference was the theme of change. As I said earlier, all participants were of the view that public administration should be an agent of change, should be an agent of social change, should be an agent of social equity. Social equity and social change should be the objectives of public administration. They severely attacked the powerful people whose interests are entrenched in the governmental institutions. They wanted to bereft governmental institutions of the interests of powerful people. They wanted to institutionalize change. So they deliberated upon the ways and methods to institutionalize change. Apart from these themes that were discussed, three anti-goals were identified by Dulembesky. Robert T. Dulembesky identified three anti-goals of new public administration. He said that it should be anti-positivist, it should be anti-technical, and it should be anti-bureaucratic and hierarchical. By anti-positivist, he meant rejecting a definition of public administration as value-free. Rejecting any definition of public administration that was not properly involved in policy, as was the case with the native politics administration dichotomy. So he rejected the value neutrality concept. And the second anti-goal is that it is anti-technical, that new public administration is anti-technical. Anti-technical in the sense that it deprives the emotive, creative mankind, because the traditional public administration gave much importance to the rules, regulations, procedures instead of emotions and creativity of the workers and mankind. So that was the traditional public administration was completely mechanistic. So in this sense, the new public administration would be anti-technical. And the third anti-goal of new public administration is that it is less bureaucratic, unlike the classical public administration, and it is anti-hierarchical also, unlike classical public administration. So these were the themes and anti-goals of new public administration. Then the further development that took place in the evolution of administrative theory is new public management. New public management was based on two theoretical bases. The new public management has two theoretical bases. Number one, public choice theory, and number two, neo-Taylorism. Basically, what is new public management? The new public management is a phenomenon which was developed in the 1990s. Over a period of time, that is since 1980s, lot of new conceptualizations, new practices that were taking place in the public agencies. So these new conceptualizations and new practices that are being followed in public agencies referred to new public management. So to begin with, what is public choice theory? Since the new public management has two theoretical bases, that is public choice theory and neo-Taylorism. So we will first discuss about the public choice theory. The public choice theory is a theory that attacked the state monopoly in the provisions of public goods and services. This theory was advocated by Vincent Ostrom. Vincent Ostrom was the chief protagonist of this public choice theory. Apart from Vincent Ostrom, people like Buchanan, Chulot, Downs and Niskanen also supported this theory. The basic assumptions of public choice theory are: one, that this theory considers all human beings as rational. This theory thinks that all human beings are rational and they take every decision rationally. So in order to take rational decisions, every person or individual has to be equipped with adequate information. Then only he will be in a position to take decision rationally. So this is what they assume. I mean, the supporters of this theory assume that every human being is rational. And the second assumption of this theory is that individuals are utility maximizers. Every individual wants to maximize his or her utility. So, public choice approach holds that the real life bureaucrat is characterized by self-aggrandizement, resource manipulation and interest generally antithetical to public interest. These thinkers like Vincent Ostrom, Niskanen, Cholot, Buchanan, they were of the opinion that bureaucrats never function for the interests of public. Rather, they say they work for their own interests. In the guise of working for people, they work for their own interests. This is the argument they made. And they also said that there is nothing like neutrality. They call neutrality as a big myth. So they reject the notion of only politicians and bureaucrats can take care of public interest. So they are against this notion. On the other hand, they say that institutional plurality should be encouraged. The governmental monopoly should be done away with. They want to have democratic administration in the place of bureaucratic administration. The classical public administration was characterized as bureaucratic administration. So they wanted to replace bureaucratic administration with democratic administration. So they wanted to minimize the role of state. They emphasize on the retrenchment of the work staff, downsizing of the government. And Vincent Ostrom has questioned the central assumption that this governmental structures can only serve the best interests of the public. This is a big myth according to him. There is no evidence to suggest that only bureaucrats can maximize the interests of people in comparison to non-governmental organizations. So that's why they felt that there is a need for diverse democratic administrative structures, popular participation, decentralized authority, and decentralized organization. So Vincent Ostrom was of the view that all these things, that is decentralized authority, decentralized organization, diverse democratic administrative structures, popular participation, provide more opportunities for citizens with choices. So Vincent Ostrom argues that there is little evidence to suggest that bureaucracy is more efficient than other alternative organizational forms. The public choice theory recommends certain things. They are organizational reform, reduction of the role of state, and the discretionary power of politicians. They wanted to curb government monopolies. They wanted curbing of the power of politicians and bureaucrats to impose taxation beyond a certain limit. So these were the recommendations made by public choice theorists. So in effect, they wanted state to play minimum role, and they wanted state to allow private sector to play more active role, and they wanted to have competition between both government and private sector, so that in the process individual who is treated as customer is benefited. So this is their argument. But this theory doesn't hold relevant or true in the context of third world countries, because in the third world countries, state is the major player of social change. It is the state which carries out infrastructural projects in the areas of roads, transport, education, healthcare, etc. So, this public choice theory approach, which emphasizes on the minimal role of state, will prove disastrous to third world countries because private sector always works for the financial interests. So if it works for the financial interests, then in the third world countries, which are full of economically weaker sections, will be left with nothing. So this is not appropriate in the case of third world countries. So there is another theoretical basis of new public management, that is neo-Taylorism, and this was advocated by David Osborne and Ted Gabler. They have written a book named Reinventing Government. So in this Reinventing Government, they came up with the idea of entrepreneurial government. So they emphasized on the adoption of private sector techniques in the public sector, because public sector is underperforming and private sector is successful, thriving because of its practices and techniques. So they wanted to have a synthesis between public and private. So they came up with a formula for successful entrepreneurial government. So they have suggested 10 points. So number 1, they said that government should give up its monopoly in the provision of goods and services. David Osborne and Ted Gabler in their book recommended that government should give up its monopoly in the provision of goods and services. Private sector or market forces should also be allowed to provide goods and services to the people. Both government and private sector should compete with each other in providing quality goods and services to the people. The emphasis should be on the quality of goods and services. And the second point said by them was that bureaucracy should be accountable to the clients, that is people, and at the same time people should also have the power to control the bureaucrats. So then only bureaucrats will feel accountable towards people. So, and the third point is that bureaucrats should work in the time-bound manner. Outcomes and results should be delivered in the time-bound manner. And at the same time, performance should be measured in the time-bound manner. Then only people will get quality services and goods. Personnel should be goal oriented and not bound by rules and regulations which often impede performance. Those who are engaged in delivering public goods and services should be goal oriented and they should not be bound by rules and regulations. And the fifth point highlighted by them was citizens should be redefined as customers. Citizens should be seen as customers. And the sixth point is preempting the problems. Even before problem arises, those problems should be solved. Bureaucrats should not wait for a problem to happen and then solve it. So then the seventh point they said is mobilization of resources. Bureaucrats administration should emphasize or work more on mobilizing resources, how to mobilize resources and spend it economically and qualitatively so that money gets its best value. So mobilization of resources is the important aspect. Then the eighth point said by them was decentralization of power and participatory management are preferred. Decentralization of power. David Osborne and Ted Debler were against the principle of hierarchy. So they criticized the classical administration because of its hierarchical nature. So that's why they wanted to make it participatory in nature. So this is the eighth point. And the ninth point highlighted by them was market and private sector techniques should be given precedence over bureaucratic management. So the bureaucratic methods, the conventional bureaucratic methods and practices should be done away with, and new market and private sector techniques and methods should be followed and adopted so that best results are yielded. And the third point they highlighted was the problems of the people should be solved by all sectors, public, private and voluntary sections. So David Osborne and Ted Gabler's thoughts influenced many Western countries. And most of the Western countries influenced by David Osborne and Ted Gabler introduced several steps in their countries, like they reduced their budgets, they have downsized the governments, they have privatized public sector enterprises, they have outsourced their services to the private sector. So all these measures have taken by Western countries, and India is also following these practices. But again, as far as criticism is concerned, it is only this new public management model is suitable only to developed countries, and it is not suitable and not appropriate in the context of third world countries, because private sector always caters to the needs of those who are economically strong. it doesn't cater to the needs of those who are poor. So ultimately the poor people should be and will be looked after by the government. So therefore this new public management model is not relevant in the context of third world countries, because it will create more gaps between rich and poor. Thanks, and in the next audio I will come up with another topic. Until then, bye.